Guys, welcome to my channel. My name is ReadingBear and I hope you are ready for some more stories. And today, we'll take a look at some new entitled people content. If you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comment. And now, let's dive right into the stories.
The first story is titled, "Neighbor Destroyed My Lawn with Dangerous Chemicals and Vandalized My Property." TLDR. I fire a man's son from mowing my lawn and get a professional. Suddenly strange things start to happen as my mailbox is vandalized and eggs were thrown at my house. When my lawn started dying, I got to the bottom of it with a hidden camera and saw that it was my neighbor the entire time. He got 3 years of probation and now my lawn is healthy again and he doesn't speak a word to me anymore. Most people who post stories here about their crazy neighbors have some idea when things happened that there was an underlying problem. My case however is odder because until he was actually caught, I didn't really have any problems with this neighbor. We weren't friends or anything, but we coexisted without ever having an argument. So, looking back to start this story I really had to think about what kind of motive this guy might have had against me. After a lot of thinking I really could only come up with one reason that this guy had to go to these kinds of extremes. The last few years his teenage son would mow my lawn and I would pay him for it. I got a promotion and my wife asked me if I could hire a professional because they trim the hedges, maintain the flower beds, and do a lot of other things that a teenager with a simple mower just can't do. When I explained it to both of them, they seemed calm and said they understood. I wasn't his only customer, so he wasn't losing out on a ton of money from me anyway. It was so insignificant that I didn't even think about it until only about a week ago. Anyway, onto what happened that started to cause me concern. It started with a few small incidents like graffiti on my mailbox and eggs on my car. There were a ton of kids in my neighborhood, and I just assumed a few got bored and wanted to play some mean jokes on random neighbors. The problem was that it didn't stop there. Trash cans went missing, my mailbox was bent to the point it wasn't really usable, and I always had to check before backing out that something sharp wasn't left with the intention of damaging my car. The biggest giveaway though was that this wasn't happening to anyone else near me, it was just my house. Still, I was convinced it was some stupid kids that just picked me as a target for some reason. That was when things got more serious, and I couldn't ignore it any longer. I had tried many peaceful solutions like getting a gate and putting up automatic outdoor lighting to try and scare them away. It wasn't working through, and these seemingly harmless pranks were getting worse. I went outside one day and noticed that my lawn was dying out of nowhere. I couldn't figure out for the life of me what was causing my lawn to die. Like I said before, I now had a landscaper, and he was also just as baffled to what had happened. He did give me a small piece of advice that he had never seen something like that happen naturally before, only with chemicals. At this point I was officially fed up and decided to put up a security camera hidden in my yard to find and catch what I still thought were teenagers in the act of destroying my property. Maybe if I recognized them, I could take the tape to their parents, and they could help me out. I was shocked though when one morning I rewound the video and saw at about 3 in the morning it was neighbor entering my yard. He wasn't with anyone and my theory of kids playing bad pranks was officially gone. You could see him clearly in the video spraying chemicals all over my lawn. I honestly couldn't believe what I was watching because as I said I didn't know any issues that I was having with him. Still, I wasn't going to let him get away with this and I took the video to the police so they could do something about it. Those chemicals were dangerous and not only destroying my yard, but I felt could be a danger to one of the many dogs that walk around and on my lawn. I was really hoping that I wouldn't need to waste any more time out of my life dealing with him and was happy when I learned I didn't need to appear in court. I was however able to find out what happened to neighbor after he pled guilty on a charge of chemical mischief. Honestly, the thought of a 40-something-year-old man being charged with mischief just sounds funny to me. In the end though it was agreed upon that he wasn't going to serve any jail time, but he was going to be on probation for 3 years. That meant if he tried to continue what he was doing to me then he probably was going to end up in jail. So, every day I had to go outside and see my dead lawn with neighbor just standing there, almost gloating. It was also safe to say that my wife was deeply upset about the state of our yard because she actually had plans for it now that we had a professional. She was going to plant some flowering bushes and other goodies, but now that money was being used to fix our lawn and get it back into somewhat decent shape. I kept the camera up just in case, but he was smart enough to leave my property alone. Still, I was angry at just how upset my wife was, so I decided to get one last small piece of revenge. None of the other neighbors knew what was going on between us because nobody is very nosy here. I made sure after he had his plea deal that everyone on the block knew why my lawn looked as bad as it did. They could only stare at him in shock over how such a nice-looking man could do something like this to his neighbor. Meanwhile, I wasn't speaking to him at all, and when I went outside and saw he was there just doing what I had to do as if nobody lived in the house next to me. Things are finally clearing up and new grass is coming in nice and green again as if the chemical attacks never happened. I got my wife everything she wanted, and it seems like everything is back to normal now. I don't know for sure and probably never will what his motivation to do those things to me came from. I still have a strong feeling it came from me firing his teenage son from mowing my lawn. It's only a guess though, and as far as I know he could have been mad for an entirely different reason. The next story is titled, Neighbor's Child Has Disabilities and Won't Stop Climbing the Fence, Entering My House and Freeing My Dogs. For the past 7 months after moving into my new house with my daughter and dogs, the neighbor's child, who's 15 or 16 and has pretty severe Down syndrome, has increasingly been entering my property and home. At first, I just talked to the neighbors, and they were at first really sorry and vowed to monitor her more while she's in their backyard. However, after a few months they just genuinely do not care anymore and brush it off. I've installed security cameras in the backyard and front yard purely for my own safety insurance-wise because we do have a pool. She will climb the fence into my yard, 6 feet wooden privacy fence, with a ladder from their shed, and let my dogs out. I've fixed her letting my dogs free, as she says, by using chains and padlocks on the 2 gates. Before this became a common occurrence, she even would let the dogs out of the house and then free them. Numerous times if my garage door is open, she will leave their backyard and just walk into my house to free my dogs. I don't know what the purpose is other than it's something she just has to do for whatever reason. When she climbs into the backyard, sometimes when I'm not even home, and she cannot get back out, she begins screaming and crying and just shuts down. Before I started chaining and locking my gates because of her releasing my dogs, her parents would just walk in and get her and leave. Now since I've chained it, they start a huge fit about me having her locked in my backyard, and they have to climb the fence, bring the ladder over and carry her back over. Somehow this is my fault. Now I'm not really blaming her because she mentally doesn't know any better. She has some very severe issues and she's damn lucky my dogs are super nice, purebred German Shepherd, an English Bulldog and a mixed Shepherd/Bulldog. I just honestly worry about her safety in the backyard, climbing fences, and her seemingly not being watched as she needs to be. I have a pool, and if she falls in when I'm not home she could very well drown. That's why I installed security cameras to cover my own ass if that ever happens. I truly hope it never does, but it seems her parents just put her in the backyard and that's it. I've called the local Child and Family Services office, CPS, several times in the past 2 months to report it because I feel she is at risk with her parents' inattentiveness and their seemingly not caring attitude of her just going into people's yards, garages, houses, etc. I have a full garage of power tools, table saws, etc. that I've now had to resort to flipping the breaker off when I open the doors out of fear she may severely injure herself. I feel like I've done everything I can, talked to the parents numerous times, called Child and Family Services, installed cameras, locked my gates further. I just have no idea what to do now. I've debated calling the police when she enters, but I don't know how that will escalate. Update. I'm sad about this update for the kid. I took the majority of the given advice and called the police non-emergency number and asked for an officer to come out because I had questions about an issue I'm having and briefly explained it. Officer shows up, I invite him in and explain the whole situation. He isn't really sure what to do about it right now, so he asked for a supervisor come to his position. Supervisor shows up and I go over the whole thing again. We go upstairs to my computer where I have all the videos clipped and saved. 9 times of her entering the backyard and 4 of her entering the house through the garage. We watched each one and he gets on his cell phone and goes back to his car. A few minutes later he comes back with 3 flash drives and asks me to copy the videos over to the drive and had me fill out a piece of paper stating what I put on the drive and then signed it. I repeated it all 3 times. About 45 minutes later, after we have been talking and he's been on and off his cell phone the entire time, 2 CPS workers show up and review the videos again and take a complete statement from me going back to the first time it happened. This took about 2 hours because they wanted it to be precise and as accurate as I remember it and left out anything I wasn't 100% sure on. The officers and CPS workers head next door to talk to the parents. Parents apparently shut the door in their faces and said they didn't want to talk, but because of my statement and the videos of her climbing over, getting stuck, having to be carried back over the times I'm at work or gone and just entering the house, they had probable cause to enter the home anyways. After they were inside their house for about 10 to 15 minutes, another cop car shows up, followed by another a few minutes later. I'm in my garage, so I don't know exactly what happened inside, but after more officers showed up, the father was put in the back of a car and the daughter was put into the CPS workers' van and they left. The father was driven away about 10 minutes after that. Then about an hour later, the mother is also put into the back of a car and they drive away. I talked to the initial officer that showed up and asked for a supervisor, and he tells me they found drugs, pills not in prescription bottles or not their prescriptions, and that the home was just not being taken care of inside and definitely not a safe environment for a child. Said they found drugs not secured and in areas the child had access to them. I haven't seen them since the day after the post. I feel bad for the kid being in that situation and me being a neighbor not even knowing and my not wanting to call the cops. I didn't think it was anything like they found. I just figured it is really tough raising a kid and add on top of that severe mental disabilities, and it's even tougher. I should have called them earlier once the CPS reports I was doing over the phone didn't ever do anything. The last story is entitled Neighbor Just Demanded Her Garbage Back or Compensation. TLDR. Neighbor tricked me into refinishing a piece of her furniture. I destroyed my work just so she couldn't have it back. I just came inside from this confrontation, although apparently it started months ago, and I just didn't know it. Now I moved to this neighborhood about a year and a half ago. It was bigger than my old place, so I wanted a few more pieces of furniture and also wanted to swap out a few pieces. I am too cheap to buy new for the most part. Soft furnishings too big to go in the washing machine are the only things I usually buy new, so I upcycle and refinish most of my furniture. I do this mostly in my garage, but any spraying I do in the front yard on the mulch. Most of the neighbors had stopped at some point to welcome me or talk about my projects. A few had asked if I took orders. I told them I do, and at a pretty low cost because I don't do professional quality, but it would have to wait a little bit as I wanted to finish my personal projects first. One of the neighbors who asked was the neighbor lady, NL, across the street. When I gave her my answer, she sorts of sniffed and said fine. This was almost a year ago. A few months ago was the yearly large trash pickup, where you can put almost anything on the curb and the city will take it to the dump for you. It's a great time to pick up new pieces. NL had a pile of actually trashed items out. But as I was working in the garage, I saw her lug a console/entry table to the curb. It looked beat up, but not broken, and it was one of the pieces I was actually looking for. I headed over. It was pretty beat up as suspected. The finish was scratched to hell. A pet had chewed one of the legs, but it was a solid piece, so I asked if I could have it. NL said of course, so I got my dolly and stashed in my garage. It sat in the garage for a few months, but last weekend I decided to work on it. I sand down and refinish most pieces, but after assessing the condition of the wood, I decided I was just going to paint this piece, as the patching for the damage would be too visible through a stain. I striped and sanded the piece down, fixed the damage. Today I got it out and painted it in the front yard. It's a navy color and I'm pretty happy with how it's going to turn out. Just as I was finishing putting away all the tools and paint, NL came marching across the street. I thought she would just admire it, as people like seeing their old trash transformed. But instead she said, "I've decided that I don't want to give you this table, so I'm going to come get it when it's done drying." "No," I said, "you gave it to me, it's mine and I've put in a fair amount of time and money to refinish it." NL. "But it's mine, you stole it from me, and I want it back." Me. "No, it's now mine, if you want it back it will be $150. NL. Shock, gasp. "But it's trash now, you ruined it, I thought you were going to refinish it." Me. "Then why do you want it back? Plus I like it like this. Any other refinishing would have taken too long and cost too much." NL. "Fine, if you want to keep it, I'll take $200 for it, so I can buy a new one." Me. "No, you said I could take it from your trash pile. I even asked you before taking it, it's mine now." NL. "I'll just come take it while you sleep. For context, I usually leave pieces in the yard overnight to dry." Me. "Fine, I guess I'll just take it inside now." I then grabbed the leg of the table and proceeded to drag it into the garage. NL reached out to stop me but recoiled once she realized it was still wet. I pulled it in and waved at her with my now paint-covered hand as the door closed. It was a bit petty, and my hand is covered in paint, spray paint, so it doesn't come off easily, and I'll have to redo the leg, but it was worth the look on her face. Thinking back as I typed this, I think this might have been her plan all along, get me to take it, refinish it and demand it back. I normally would have charged like $30 to $40 to refinish something like that, but because she tried to trick me, the price more than tripled and she ended up with nothing. Of course, she still is my neighbor. I'm sure I'll have more fun with her in the future. Thanks for listening.